It is believed that a woman is the bedrock of the home. She is saddled with the responsibility of ensuring everything is okay and also providing support for the home. Today's story reveals a mother whose life was cut short while trying to earn some extra cash to support her family. Welcome to YARO Crime. Today, we'll be looking at the tragic case of Telma Boinville. Before we continue, please do well to like and subscribe to our channel to get regular updates on our videos. Thank you. Welcome to Hawaii. Deriving its name from the largest island, it is one of the most amazing places on the planet. It is located on the Pacific Plate and is the only state in America that has no geographical connection with North America. Hawaii is occupied almost entirely by islands, with about 137 volcano islands. It is mostly dominated by a plantation economy because of its very fertile soil and outstanding climate. Though Hawaii is known to be very busy, with a lot of tourists and travelers, Pupukia, which is the home of Telma Boinville and her family, is a more quiet and less busy area. Born on the 4th of February 1966, Telma was 51 years old at the time. She was married to Kevin Emery, and they had an 8-year-old daughter named Makana. Telma relocated from Brazil to Hawaii in the early 1990s, and she immediately fell in love with the beautiful mega island and the people's way of life. She decided to take up a job as a part-time teacher at a local school named Sunset Beach Elementary. The other part of her life was basically stress-free, as the only duty she had was to take care of her family and give them the most support she could offer. Telma had what some could say was a perfect life. How she was able to balance everything out is something that is very fascinating. Aside from supporting her family financially and still being present to take care of things, she still found time for her own husbands. One of which was surfing. This was one of the things that made Hawaii a perfect location for her. She was very passionate about it and was also very good at it. She wasn't just a surfer, but would regularly go on runs, practice yoga and martial arts, and find her way around baking. It really seemed like Telma had a very peaceful lifestyle. Telma was said to be very protective of her friends, was very fun to be with, and also liked to party. Now moving on to the darker part of the story, in an effort to make more money to help with her family's finances, Telma decided to take up another job as a cleaner. Her family had earlier made plans to go on vacation, so earning that extra cash would have meant a lot to them. It was a Thursday afternoon on December 7, 2017. Telma had gone to clean an Airbnb that was located near the small town of Rock Pile. She had gone to the home to clean while awaiting some Australian tourists who were supposed to arrive there later that day. She could not afford to leave her daughter alone at home, so she took her along. She asked Makana to wait for her in the truck while she carried out her duty. After kissing her daughter on the forehead, she left her to watch a movie, and she went on to do the cleaning. Notwithstanding, it was very common in an area like Brockville, and her daughter was very safe alone in the truck, and she wasn't going to take much time. But moving forward to 3 hours later, come time to when the Australian tourists would check in. They were hoping to meet a beautiful home after their long travel. But what they witnessed was a devastating scene of Telma, who apparently had been beaten to death. Her hands, torso, head, face, and shoulders were all covered with blunt and sharp force trauma, and the murder weapons, which included a hammer, a mallet, a bloody baseball bat, and a knife, were all found nearby. The name Axel had been written in blood above one of the main door frames, and the whole apartment was in complete shambles. The tourists immediately ran outside to call the police, and upon their arrival, they found Telma's daughter tied up in bands upstairs, and she was thankfully uninjured. This was indeed a very traumatic experience for the young girl, which would probably go on to haunt her mind for a very long time. Though Makana was in disarray, she was still able to recount to the officer what had happened. She told the police that while she was still watching a movie in the car, a very scary man with green hair knocked on her window and told her that she had just killed her mother. She could also remember seeing a woman with him. She was then forcefully dragged inside and put in one of the rooms. Then both perpetrators fled away in her mother's truck. Of course, the entire community was devastated by the news, and with the place being so sociable, in no time the news had spread all over the place. Not long after, her family and friends learned what had happened to Telma. Her family members were obviously so devastated by the news, and her brother-in-law, who was a famous surfer, made a public plea offering $100,000 to anyone who would get hold of her killers.
I have $100,000 cash right now for anybody who can tell me who just tied up my niece and duct taped my niece and killed her mother at Keiki Beach on the North Shore of Oahu. $100,000 right now. If you can tell me who just murdered my twin brother's girl and tied up my niece.
And as you would imagine, with the description given by her daughter, the police and the entire community of the North Side were now on a manhunt for the perpetrator of the crime. They started by searching for Telma's missing truck, and it did not take long before they found it, as several hours later, Telma's truck was spotted in a parking lot just outside town, and the assailant was inside the vehicle. A man and woman in their 20s, with the man having green clown-like hair. The man kept resisting the arrest and shouting to the officers, "Shoot me, I deserve it." The woman, though seeming calmer, also appeared to be insane, as she told the officers to pull out their guns and shoot her, and that her life was over anyway. The suspects were later identified as 23-year-old Stephen Brown and 20-year-old Haley Danderand. Both criminals were a couple and had been dating for a while. The police found Telma's bank card. She was also wearing Thelma's earring in her daughter's backpack. To add to all this, their hands were covered with dried blood. Both of the suspects were now arrested and in the custody of the police, and all eyes were now on Stephen and Haley. The questions on people's minds were, who exactly were these people, and what reason could they have had to commit such a gruesome crime? Stephen Brown, who was 23 at the time of his arrest, had been residing on the island for a couple of years. He was born in Ohio, but spent most of his life in Florida. Stephen apparently had a rocky childhood, with his father out of the picture and his mother barely around and mostly in the homes of other men. This had left the young man with the burden of fending for himself and his sister. He had lived in foster homes until he was finally adopted by the Brown family at the age of 11. There was much to tell about Stephen, aside from the fact that he attended Northeast High School in Florida. His classmates there described him as weird, and those around him attested to his violent nature. There were later reports of how he had physically assaulted his ex-girlfriend. He had also been charged with a felony in the second degree, which eventually led to him getting a bench warrant after violating conditions of his probation. He relocated to Hawaii in 2015 and has lived an irresponsible life ever since. He had claimed to be a vocalist and guitarist, but was not really recognized in town for his talent. Stephen was known to be very rebellious, with no regard for other possessions. He had also given himself the name Axel Hayes Hendricks, and if you recall, that's the name that was written on the doorframe. He had also posted a video some days before the incident where he and Haley laughed and talked about the end.
We just died. Again. This is our dying video.
Yeah.
It was nice knowing you, World.
Sort of.
Haley, on the other hand, was a 20-year-old girl who was also living on the island. She had fallen in love with Stephen shortly after moving to Hawaii, despite her crazy persona, which she had displayed her classmates from her school, actually described her as kind. She was the daughter of an elementary school teacher and was doing quite well in school. At that time, Haley was attending community college and had been dating Stephen for a few months. Before we go into what happened next, after they were arrested, let's discuss what happened on the day of the incident. That afternoon, Thelma had gone into the home to do the cleaning after leaving her daughter in the truck. But upon her arrival, she discovered she was not alone. The two had broken into the home some minutes earlier, and after they realized Telma's presence, they threatened to hurt her and eventually tortured and killed her. While trying to flee, they noticed her daughter in the car and told her they had killed her mother, probably to scare her, then dragged her upstairs and then came to wait out in Telma's truck. They waited till they noticed the tourists in the vicinity, then fled in the truck until they were eventually apprehended by the police. They were then charged with second-degree murder, kidnapping, robbery, and other charges in connection with Telma's murder. The two were trialed separately, and that trial did not begin until 5 years later. During their trial, Stephen denied killing Thelma and claimed that Haley had killed Telma when he left the room, saying he only broke into the house to steal some items and was only guilty of burglary. After much deliberation, he was later found guilty of all the charges against him while Haley awaited trial. Telma was a kind-hearted woman who just wanted to take care of her family and live her life to the fullest. It is a sad thing that her life had to be cut short by miscreants who had nothing to offer the world.